Before the computer had a screen, before it had a keyboard, before it waited for anyone to touch it, it was a room. Not a room meant for comfort, not a place designed for sitting or resting or staying long. It was a working space, built around necessity rather than presence. The walls were close, sometimes painted, sometimes bare. Cables ran along them without decoration, without apology. The floor was hard, often raised, hiding more wires underneath, as if the real machine lived below the surface. Inside this room, there were no desks, no chairs facing forward, no single point of attention. Instead, there were cabinets, tall, metal frames standing side by side like silent sentinels, each one filled with glowing tubes, switches, dials, and lights. Thousands of small components, each doing one simple thing, together forming something no single person could fully understand. The computer did not sit in the room. The computer was the room. The air inside was warm, not gently warm, not comforting like a fireplace, but heavy with heat produced by effort. Vacuum tubes glowed softly, a steady amber light that never flickered quickly, never reacted to human presence. This glow was not meant to be seen. It was a side effect of thinking. The sound came first. A low hum, constant and unchanging, not loud enough to demand attention, but persistent enough that silence could not exist here. Fans moved air through metal corridors. Relays clicked occasionally, quietly, like a distant clock marking time without seconds. People who worked here learned to listen. They noticed when the hum changed. They noticed when a light went dark, or when a pattern of blinking fell out of rhythm. The computer had no voice, but it had moods. When something went wrong, the room felt different, not emotional, not anxious, but unsettled, as if balance had shifted. Humans did not interact with these machines the way we do now. There was no conversation, no feedback loop, no immediate response. You did not ask the computer a question. You prepared a task. Preparation took hours, sometimes days. Problems were broken down by hand, written on paper, checked and rechecked. The computer was not there to help you think. It was there to execute thinking already done. Once the instructions were ready, they were translated into physical form. Punch cards, stacks of them. Each card held a fragment of intention, a hole here, no hole there, a rigid language made of absence. These cards were carried into the room, handled carefully, because dropping them meant disorder, and disorder meant starting over. The computer did not forgive mistakes. It did not adapt. It did not guess. If the input was wrong, the output would be wrong. Quietly, efficiently, without complaint. People fed the machine and waited. Waiting was part of the process. Minutes stretched, sometimes hours. Nothing happened visibly. No screen changed. No progress bar moved. The room continued humming. The lights continued glowing. The machine worked in its own time. When results finally emerged, they arrived on paper. Long sheets, printed line by line. Numbers, tables, answers without explanation. The computer did not tell you how it arrived there, only that it had. In these rooms, thinking was physical. You could feel it in the heat, hear it in the sound, see it in the glow of tubes. This was computation as labor. These machines were built for tasks that mattered: ballistics, weather prediction, census data, scientific research, war. They existed because human minds had limits, not limits of intelligence, but limits of endurance. A human could calculate, but not endlessly, not without error, not without rest. The room did not need rest. It worked through the night, through weekends, through holidays. At night, the room changed character. Fewer people remained. Footsteps were rare, voices lowered instinctively, as if the machine required quiet. The glow felt stronger in darkness, not brighter, but more present. Lights reflected off metal surfaces. Shadows stretched between cabinets. The room seemed deeper, larger than it had during the day. Some operators described a strange feeling at night, a sense that the room was awake, even when they were tired. Not alive, not conscious, but active in a way that felt separate from human rhythms. The computer did not sleep. It did not slow down after sunset. Time passed differently here. Outside, cities quieted, streets emptied, homes dimmed their lights. Inside this room, nothing changed. The same hum, the same glow, the same patience. People who spent long hours here adjusted themselves to the machine. They learned its cycles. They aligned their routines around maintenance windows and processing schedules. Breaks were taken, not when humans needed them, but when the machine allowed them. Gradually, subtly, the room shaped behavior. It demanded order, precision, silence. There was no room for distraction, no place for casual presence. This was not a personal space. You did not bring yourself into it. You left parts of yourself outside. In a way, the room trained its caretakers. It rewarded calm attention. It punished haste. Errors were expensive, not emotionally, but temporally. Mistakes meant repeating entire processes, re-preparing cards, rerunning jobs, waiting again. The machine taught patience, whether anyone intended it to or not. And yet, for all its power, this computer knew nothing. It did not understand numbers. It did not understand war or science or weather. It followed instructions, perfectly, relentlessly. Thinking happened around it, in notebooks, on chalkboards, in meetings. The room executed thinking. It did not originate it. Still, standing inside, surrounded by sound and heat and light, it was difficult not to feel something else. A sense of scale, a sense of distance from ordinary life. The problems solved here were abstract, removed from daily experience. You could not see a missile trajectory. You could not touch a statistical model, but you could feel the room working on them. In that sense, the room became a threshold, a place where human intention crossed into mechanical process, where thought became physical movement, where ideas turned into electrical states. This was new. Never before had thinking taken up so much space. Never before had it required cooling systems, maintenance teams, entire buildings. The computer was not an object, it was infrastructure. And like all infrastructure, it was invisible to most people. Outside this room, life continued as usual. People slept, people ate, people lived without ever knowing what calculations were being run overnight. The room did not ask to be noticed. It simply worked. Over time, these rooms multiplied. Universities built them. Governments funded them. Corporations began to understand their potential. Each room looked slightly different, but they shared a feeling, a seriousness, a quiet intensity. They were not places of creativity, but places of execution. Creativity happened elsewhere. Here, creativity ended. When a problem entered the room, it lost its narrative. It became numbers, states, processes. In that reduction, something was gained: speed, accuracy, reliability. And something was lost: context, meaning, human texture. The room did not care. And perhaps that was the point. Humans are distracted by meaning. Machines are not. As years passed, these rooms slowly shrank. Tubes became transistors. Cabinets became smaller. Heat decreased. Noise softened. But But in this early moment, thinking was still heavy, still loud, still spatial. If you stood still long enough, you could forget where you were. Time dissolved into hum and glow. The room did not demand your attention, but it absorbed it. And in those moments, late at night, alone among cabinets and cables, it was possible to feel something quietly unsettling. The realization that thinking, once private, internal, human, had found a new form. A form that did not get tired, did not doubt, did not sleep. The room was not alive, but it was active, and it was thinking. Before computers became personal, before they had icons, windows, and gentle animations, they were machines without a face. Not because they were hidden, but because they had nothing to look at. No screen to meet your eyes, no cursor to blink patiently, no friendly glow that suggested a presence, only cabinets, only panels, only lights that did not communicate. They only reported. In those early rooms, the computer did not invite a relationship. It did not ask for attention. It did not pretend to understand you. It was power without expression. To work with it, you didn't sit down. You stood, you moved, you carried materials in your hands. A stack of punch cards was heavy in a specific way. Not heavy like stone, not heavy like metal, heavy like responsibility. Because every card had a place, and every place mattered. The cards were stiff and dry, edges clean and sharp enough to feel. They made a soft, papery sound when you tapped them against a desk to align the corners. Straighten, tap, straighten again. Small rituals that kept order. Each card contained a line of instruction or a piece of data expressed as wholes. Wholes that meant something. And if you looked closely at a punch card, you could feel how unnatural that language was. A human thinks in words, images, instincts. A machine here thought in absence. A whole meant yes. No whole meant no. And thousands of these quiet decisions became a program. But the machine itself did not know any of that. It only accepted the cards. It pulled them in mechanically, one after another, in a rhythm that did not care what the cards said. The operator's job was not to use the computer, not in the modern sense. The operator's job was to protect the process, to feed it clean input, to keep it from choking on disorder, to watch for errors not because the machine felt them, but because humans paid for them. There was a particular stillness in that role, a calm attention, not creative, not expressive, more like the careful work of a librarian or a watchmaker. You listened, you noticed, you corrected. The computer did not have a face, but it had a posture, a sense of being closed. Metal doors, locked panels, labels in small fonts. Everything about it said, "This is not for everyone." And for a long time, it wasn't. People spoke about computers the way they spoke about power plants, or telephone exchanges, or train control rooms. Important, technical, distant. There was often a window in the door, a small rectangle of glass, so you could look into the room without stepping inside. And through that window, you saw lights, cabinets, people moving quietly. The machine was working, but it looked like nothing. No drama, no spectacle, just the slow discipline of systems. Sometimes the output arrived as paper, sometimes as more cards, sometimes as tapes, reels turning slowly, like time being wound onto plastic. Tape had its own silence. It moved with a controlled smoothness, spinning, stopping, spinning again. You could stand and watch it for a long time. Not because it entertained you, but because it suggested something happening beyond your perception. a calculation you could not see, stored somewhere you could not reach. In these years, the computer felt less like a tool and more like a procedure. To run something meant to submit it. You prepared your work, you handed it in, you waited. Waiting was not a flaw. Waiting was the natural state. There were schedules, queues, priority lists. Sometimes your job ran that day. Sometimes it ran overnight. Sometimes it waited behind more important tasks. In that world, the computer did not respond to impatience. It trained you out of it. And this is part of what made it faceless. A face implies interaction, expression, feedback. But the early computer offered none of that. It was not conversational. It was not immediate. It was, in a quiet way, indifferent. This indifference could feel cold, but it was also strangely peaceful. The machine did not judge you. It did not interpret your mood. It did not misunderstand your tone. It simply processed what it was given. And in a room designed around that principle, human personality softened. People spoke less, moved carefully, did their work in orderly steps. The environment encouraged discipline. Even the lighting felt different, often fluorescent, evenly spread, designed for visibility rather than warmth. No shadows for mystery, no corners for comfort. Everything was functional. You could imagine how it felt at the end of a long shift, walking out of that room into the night. The air outside would feel thin and cool, as if you'd left a living organism behind you. The city would be dark in places, streetlights spaced out, windows quiet. And somewhere behind you, in a building that kept its own temperature, the computer continued. It did not follow the human rhythm of day and night. It did not rest because the world rested. In that sense, it had no face, because it had no life pattern you could recognize. It was awake in the wrong way. Not awake as a creature, but awake as a system. And the people who worked closest to it often developed a particular kind of relationship with that system. Not affection, not friendship, more like respect for something that could not return it. You respected the machine because it was exact. You respected it because it held consequences. A mispunched card could corrupt an entire run. A mislabeled tape could erase days of work. A sequence out of order could make results meaningless. So, you became careful. Carefulness became habit. Habit became a kind of calm. And calm, in a room like this, felt necessary. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, an operator would be alone. Just one person and the room. The hum, the faint clicks, the reels turning. In that solitude, the facelessness became stronger. A machine without a face can feel less like an object and more like a presence. Not a presence that watches you, but a presence that continues regardless of you. You could stand there and realize something strange. The room did not need you to be there. It only needed you to keep it fed, kept clean, kept correct. The human was an accessory to the process. This inversion was new. For most of history, machines were extensions of the body. A hammer extended the arm. A plow extended strength. A loom extended hands. But here, the human extended the machine. You carried its language. You translated thought into wholes. You kept its schedules. You served its rhythm. And still, the machine had no face to meet yours. No sign that it recognized the effort. No look of satisfaction when a run completed. No disappointment when it failed. Only printouts. Only lights. This made the computer feel powerful, but also, in its own way, lonely. Not lonely as an emotion, but lonely as an absence of connection. A tool without conversation. In time, That would change. The face would arrive. The moment a screen began to show characters, when the machine began to display something meant specifically for the human eye, a new relationship would begin. But here, in this chapter of its history, the computer was still faceless. A room of procedures, a system of discipline, a quiet engine that did not meet your gaze. And in that distance, something about it feels almost sacred. Not holy, not mystical, but separated from ordinary life. A place where the world was reduced to symbols, and those symbols were handled with care. A place where human thought, once private and invisible, was turned into stacks you could carry in your arms. And the machine, silent, exact, indifferent, accepted it, processed it, returned it as paper, then continued humming as if nothing had happened at all. Before the screen, the computer spoke through paper. Printouts arrived folded, stacked, perforated at the edges. Results were read later, away from the machine, under different light. Then, quietly, the screen appeared. Not colorful, not inviting, not even clearly meant to be looked at for long. It was a surface for information, nothing more. A rectangle of glass, heavy, deep, convex, like a lens that did not magnify the world, but replaced it. At first, the screen showed very little. Lines of text, single characters, a cursor that blinked without emotion, green on black, sometimes amber, never white. The colors were chosen for endurance, not beauty. They were easy on the hardware, visible in dim rooms, efficient. The screen did not glow like a lamp. It shimmered. Phosphor dots lit up briefly, then faded. The image was constantly being redrawn, so fast that the eye learned to trust it. This was not an image you looked at casually. It demanded attention. For the first time, the computer faced the human, not with a face, not with expression, but with direction. The screen created an orientation, front and back, here and there. Before, you walked around the machine. Now, you sat in front of it. This was a quiet revolution. The room rearranged itself. Desks appeared. Chairs were placed carefully at fixed distances. Keyboards settled in front of screens, as if they had always belonged there. The computer was no longer something you visited. It became something you approached. The moment the screen turned on, the room darkened slightly. Not because the lights were switched off, but because attention moved. Human eyes adjusted to the glow. The rest of the room receded. Cabinets faded into shadow. Walls became background. The screen defined the space. Text appeared line by line. Commands, responses. Not instantly. There was always a pause. You typed, you waited. The cursor blinked patiently, as if breathing. This blinking mattered. It told you the machine was ready. Not friendly, just ready. A new kind of time emerged here. Interactive time. Before, you submitted work and left. Now, you stayed. You typed a command. The screen answered, slowly but directly. This created something unfamiliar, a sense of presence, not intelligence, not understanding, but immediacy. The computer no longer disappeared between steps. It stayed with you moment to moment. The screen changed how people worked at night. Before, night meant waiting. Now, night meant interaction. Rooms grew quieter. Voices dropped. The soundscape changed. Instead of paper shuffling and machinery hum, there were keys. Soft clicks, rhythmic, uneven. The keyboard became the new intermediary, a physical bridge between body and machine. Hands learned patterns. Fingers memorized distances. Typing became muscle memory, a form of silent conversation. The screen rewarded precision. It punished mistakes instantly. A wrong character produced an error, sometimes cryptic, sometimes blunt. The machine did not explain itself. It simply responded. This response shaped behavior. People slowed down. They thought before typing. They learned to be careful with language. Because here, language was literal. The screen did not interpret intention, only symbols. And yet, something subtle happened. People began to feel watched, not by the machine, but by the surface itself. A screen feels different from paper. Paper absorbs attention. A screen reflects it. You could see yourself faintly in the glass, your outline, your movement. At night, this reflection was stronger. A face hovering behind green text, a human presence behind machine symbols. This changed the emotional texture of work. The computer was no longer distant. It was intimate in a strange way. You sat close to it. You leaned in. Your posture curved toward the glow. Time passed differently here. Minutes stretched. Hours collapsed. The screen held attention with quiet authority. There were no images to distract, no color to entertain, only text. And text has weight. Lines of code, logs, messages. Each character mattered. Each space mattered. The screen demanded care. At the same time, it offered something new. Feedback. Not approval, not encouragement, but acknowledgement. The machine responded. This response created rhythm. Type, pause, read, adjust, a loop. And in that loop, people found a peculiar calm. The screen did not rush you. It waited. The cursor blinked, steady, forgiving. It did not move until you did. This gave control back to the human. Not full control, but shared control. A partnership of timing. Late at night, this partnership felt stronger. Outside, the world slept. Inside, the screen glowed. Some people began to prefer these hours. Fewer interruptions, less noise. The machine felt more responsive when alone, even though it behaved exactly the same. This is how humans work. We project meaning onto consistency. The screen did not change, but the experience did. The glow became companionable, not friendly, but present. Unlike paper, the screen did not end. It scrolled. Information moved upward, disappearing but not gone. The sense of depth increased. You were not looking at a page. You were looking into a process. This sense of depth was subtle but powerful. The computer was no longer just executing tasks. It was revealing itself. Not its thoughts, but its workings. You could see progress. You could see errors as they happened. Transparency replaced mystery, and with transparency came trust. Not emotional trust, operational trust. You learned what to expect. The screen taught you the machine's habits, which commands took longer, which responses meant trouble, which pauses were normal. This familiarity softened the machine's earlier severity. It was still exact, still indifferent, but now it was legible, a machine you could read. The room adapted again. Lights were dimmed intentionally, not fully dark, but low enough to reduce glare. This dimness created atmosphere, a workspace defined by glow and shadow. The screen became the brightest object in the room. It set the mood. People began to speak of screen time, though not yet with concern. Time in front of the screen felt productive, focused, contained. The screen absorbed distraction. It narrowed the world. This narrowing was useful. It made complexity manageable, but it also created isolation. One person, one screen. Others faded away. Even in shared rooms, each screen created its own bubble. Silent islands of attention. This was new. Machines had always been shared. Now, attention was individualized. The screen made solitude practical and sometimes welcome. At night especially, the screen felt like a private space, a place to think quietly, to test ideas, to explore systems. The computer no longer required a room to itself. The room now served the screen. This inversion mattered. The machine had turned outward, not toward the world, but toward the human. This was the beginning of familiarity, not friendliness, but closeness. The screen was not expressive, but it was responsive. It did not smile, but it listened. In time, screens would multiply, shrink, change color. They would become windows, then worlds. But here, at the beginning, the screen was still simple. Text, glow, patience. A quiet surface where human thought met machine process in real time. The computer had not yet learned to speak our language, but it had learned to show itself. And in that showing, something fundamental shifted. The machine stepped forward, not as a presence with a face, but as something you could sit with, something you could return to night after night, something that waited, glowing softly, ready when you were. For a long time, the computer belonged elsewhere, in rooms with rules, in buildings with badges, in spaces where silence meant discipline, not comfort. Then slowly, it moved, not all at once, not dramatically. It did not arrive with celebration. It arrived cautiously, as if unsure it was allowed to be here. The first computers in homes did not replace furniture. They borrowed it, a corner of a desk, a cleared space on a table. Sometimes the same surface used for letters, homework, or bills. The computer did not dominate the room. It adapted to it. At first, it looked out of place. Plastic where there was wood, sharp lines among familiar shapes, a faint glow in rooms designed for lamps. This was not the computer from the movies, not the one that filled rooms or demanded attention. This one was small, contained, almost modest. You could lift it, carry it, unplug it. That alone changed everything. For the first time, the computer was optional. You could turn it off and still stay in the room, still be home. The sounds were different too. No hum of large systems, no distant machinery, only a soft fan, a click when it powered on, the quiet chatter of keys. The computer did not announce itself. It waited. When it started, the screen came alive slowly. A brief flash, a pause, then text. Sometimes a simple prompt, sometimes a logo. It felt personal, even before it truly was, because this screen belonged to one place, one household, often one person. The room adjusted. Chairs were pulled closer. Lights were dimmed intentionally, not to save electricity, but to make the screen easier to see. This dimness was new. Before, computers demanded light. Now, light was shaped around them. The glow became part of the room's atmosphere. In the evening, it mixed with lamps. In the night, it stood alone. Families noticed this. A television filled a room with sound and shared attention. A computer did not. It gathered attention inward. Someone sat facing it. Others passed behind. The computer created a private space inside a shared one. This was unfamiliar. You could be present and absent at the same time. At first, computers in homes were not always on. They were turned on deliberately, used for a purpose, then turned off again. Writing, calculations, games that loaded slowly and ended abruptly. There was ceremony in this. You cleared time for the machine. You prepared. And when you were done, you shut it down. The screen went dark. The room returned to itself. This rhythm mattered. The computer did not yet demand constant presence. It did not interrupt. It waited quietly until invited. Children approached it differently. For them, the computer was not a tool first. It was a mystery. Keys that did things, commands that changed worlds. They learned through curiosity, not necessity. Adults were more cautious. They worried about breaking something, about doing something wrong. Because unlike the television, this machine responded. It reacted to input, and reaction feels like responsibility. Over time, familiarity grew. Hands learned where keys were. Eyes learned how long responses took. The computer became less fragile, even if it was not. People trusted it enough to leave it on longer. An evening stretched. A task continued. The computer stayed awake. This was new. Before, computers were always on, but far away. Now, they were on and nearby, in bedrooms, in studies, in shared living spaces. The boundary between machine time and home time blurred. Night changed the relationship again. During the day, the computer competed with life. At night, it replaced it. The house grew quiet. Others slept. The screen remained. In that quiet, the computer felt different. Not powerful, not intimidating, just present. The glow softened edges. The room felt smaller, more contained. The computer became a companion, not emotionally, but spatially. Something that shared the night with you. This presence encouraged long sessions, not because the machine asked for them, but because it allowed them. There were no closing hours, no supervisors, only fatigue and the choice to continue or stop. For some, this was freedom. For others, temptation. But at this stage, it still felt gentle. The computer did not yet follow you. It stayed where you left it. You could walk away. This mattered. The home absorbed the computer without surrendering to it. The machine learned domestic rhythms. It waited through dinners, through conversations, through silence. It did not replace the home. It nested inside it. Over time, computers became more common. What was once a curiosity became furniture. Desks were bought specifically for them. Chairs adjusted to their height. Cables were hidden, or not. The computer claimed its place, and yet it remained quieter than other machines. No moving images by default, no sound unless asked. This silence helped it stay. It did not disrupt the home's atmosphere. It adapted to it. Late at night, the computer's glow became a familiar sight. A light under a door, a rectangle in the dark. It meant someone was awake, thinking, typing, playing, learning. The computer became a marker of presence. You knew someone was there, even if you did not hear them. In this way, the computer changed the feeling of home. It extended wakefulness, created private hours inside shared space. It did not replace rest, but it reshaped it. The day no longer ended the same way for everyone. Some nights ended at the screen. Others ended before it turned on. The computer accepted both. It did not insist, and that is why it was allowed to stay. Because it arrived quietly, learned the rules, did not demand to be central, not yet. For now, the computer at home was still a guest, a useful one, an intriguing one, a machine that waited on a desk, dark and silent, until someone decided to wake it. And when it did wake, it did not change the house. It simply shared it. Evenings changed quietly. Not all at once, not in a way that demanded notice. They simply became longer. Before the computer, evenings had edges. Dinner ended, lights dimmed, rooms settled into familiar patterns. Conversations softened, radios faded, television schedules decided when the night was over. Then the computer sat down in the corner of the room and refused to tell you when to stop. It did not signal an ending. It did not announce a final moment. It waited. In the evening, the computer felt different than it did during the day. Daytime belonged to tasks, to purpose, to obligation. Evening was optional. You did not have to turn the computer on. And because of that, choosing to do so felt deliberate. A small decision, quiet, personal. The room would already be dim. A lamp on, curtains drawn. The screen, when it woke, added a second light source, cooler, sharper, not replacing the lamp, but coexisting with it. This mix of lights mattered. The lamp belonged to the room. The screen belonged to the task. Together, they divided attention gently. You could look away from the screen and still remain awake. You could pause, rest your eyes, think. Evenings with a computer were not rushed. The machine did not expect productivity. It did not enforce schedules. It allowed wandering. You could open a program and close it again, start something and abandon it halfway through. Nothing was lost. This freedom was new. Earlier machines demanded intention. The home computer tolerated curiosity. In the evening, curiosity felt safe. Mistakes mattered less. Time felt softer. The computer became a place to linger. Typing slowed. Pauses grew longer. You would stare at the screen without touching the keyboard. The cursor blinked. Patient, unconcerned. It did not fill silence. It respected it. Sound changed too. During the day, typing was functional. At night, it became audible. Each key press stood out. Clicks echoed softly in the room. The rhythm was uneven, human. The machine answered with silence. No voice, no music, just text appearing, line by line. This made evenings feel private, even when others were nearby. Someone could be in the same room, reading, resting, sleeping. The computer did not intrude. It created a separate mental space without demanding a separate physical one. This separation was subtle. You were still at home, still present, but your attention was elsewhere, inside the screen. Evenings became a time for small, contained worlds, simple games, personal writing, experiments that did not need to be shown to anyone. The computer held these quietly. It did not judge unfinished things. It did not remember embarrassment. You could try again tomorrow. As hours passed, fatigue arrived differently, not as an external signal, but as a physical one. Eyes tired first, shoulders followed. The screen did not dim itself. It did not suggest rest. It waited for you to decide. This was a responsibility people were not used to. Television ended for you. Books ended when pages ran out. The computer did not end. It could always continue. And so evenings stretched, sometimes gently, sometimes too far. But in these early years, that stretching still felt like choice. You could turn it off. And when you did, the effect was immediate. The glow vanished. The room reclaimed itself. Darkness felt fuller without the screen. This contrast mattered. It taught people that the computer was not the evening itself. It was an activity within it, a way to spend time, not a way to replace it. Many evenings ended this way. A final save, a command to shut down. The machine powered off with a click or a fading glow. Silence returned. The house settled again. But something had shifted. The idea of what an evening could hold had expanded, not louder, not brighter, just longer. People began to associate computers with night, not because they belonged there, but because night made them easier to be with. No interruptions, no demands, just you and the machine, sharing time. This sharing was not emotional. The computer did not comfort you, but it offered structure, a place to put attention when the rest of the day was finished. For some, this was relief. For others, habit. Either way, evenings were no longer empty by default. They were available. The computer made time visible. You could see hours pass in lines of text, in progress bars, in saved files with timestamps. The evening left traces. Eventually, these traces accumulated. Evenings blended together. What began as occasional use became routine. The computer learned your evenings. It waited in the same place, powered on the same way, showed the same familiar prompt. Reliability bred comfort. The machine became part of the night's furniture, not central, but expected, a quiet option. And that is how evenings with a machine became normal, not through excitement, not through necessity, but through repetition. A screen glowing while the rest of the house slept. Keys clicking softly. A cursor blinking in the dark. Time passing, unmeasured, unannounced. Just another evening, shared with a machine that did not speak, did not rush, and did not leave until you did. At first, the computer was something you used. You turned it on. You did something specific. You turned it off again. Clear edges, clear purpose. A tool behaves this way. It enters your time, then leaves it. But over time, something softened. The computer stopped waiting to be invited. Not suddenly, not deliberately. It simply began to stay. It stayed on the desk while other things happened. It stayed awake while you stood up, left the room, came back again. At some point, turning it off felt unnecessary. Why shut it down if you might return? This was the beginning. The computer was no longer an event. It became a condition. The screen dimmed instead of disappearing. Images moved slowly across it. Text faded into motion. The machine learned how to wait without going dark. This mattered. A dark screen signals absence. A dim screen signals availability. The computer was not asking for attention, but it was letting you know it was still there. Rooms changed again. You no longer arranged the room around the computer. You lived with it. It shared space with books, with cups left half full, with papers that stayed overnight. The computer did not demand tidiness. It tolerated disorder. In doing so, it became domestic. Tools are returned to their place. Presences remain where they are. Sound faded further. Fans grew quieter. Hard drives learned to sleep. The computer's noise receded below awareness. You stopped noticing when it was on. And that is when it truly arrived. Presence does not announce itself. It blends in. You noticed the computer only when it was gone. When the desk felt empty, when the glow was missing. This absence felt strange, as if something had been removed that you had not consciously placed there. The computer had crossed a threshold. The machine began to mark time, not with alarms, not with schedules, but with continuity. Files remained open. Documents waited where you left them. Windows stayed arranged in familiar patterns. You returned to the same state you had left. This created a feeling of persistence. The computer remembered for you, not emotionally, but structurally. Your thinking extended into the machine. You no longer finished thoughts in one sitting. You paused them, and the computer held them gently, unchanged, until you came back. This was different from paper. Paper waits, but it does not glow. It does not suggest readiness. The computer waited actively. Its presence felt neutral, but constant. Over time, this changed how people related to space. The room no longer reset at night. Before, night erased the day. Lights off. Surfaces cleared. Now, the day remained. The computer carried it through darkness. Morning did not begin from zero. It resumed. This continuity reshaped routine. The boundary between sessions blurred. Work and leisure intermingled. The computer did not care what you were doing. It treated all activity the same. This neutrality made it adaptable. It could be serious. It could be trivial. It could hold both without distinction. Presence does not judge. And slowly, people began to check the computer even when they did not need to. Not out of urgency, out of habit, a glance, a moment. The screen responded immediately. This responsiveness reinforced presence. The computer felt awake in the way a room feels awake when a lamp is left on. At night, this presence deepened. The computer became the last light left on, the final glow in an otherwise quiet house. It did not fill the space with noise. It simply occupied it. In this role, the computer was no longer a tool. Tools are silent until used. Presences exist regardless. The machine did not insist. It did not pull. It waited in a way that felt passive, but was not. Availability changes behavior. You stayed longer, returned more often. The computer shaped time by not interrupting it. This shift was not dramatic. No announcement marked the moment when the computer stopped being a tool. It happened quietly, through repetition, through leaving it on, through trusting it to hold things, through letting it remain in the room. Presence is not designed. It emerges. And once it does, it feels natural. The computer had learned the rhythms of the home, of evenings, of pauses. It did not replace anything. It layered itself over life, a constant background that could step forward when needed and recede when not. From tool to presence, the change was subtle, but once complete, it was difficult to reverse, because tools can be put away. Presences must be acknowledged, and the computer, now quiet, now familiar, had become something you lived with, not something you merely used. Before voices filled machines, before notifications learned how to interrupt, there was only the sound of keys, not music, not silence, something in between. The keyboard did not speak, it answered. Each key press was a small decision, made physical, a downward motion, a soft resistance, then release. In the early days of personal computers, this sound mattered more than the screen. Screens were quiet, static. They waited. The keyboard was where action lived. It translated thought into movement, movement into symbols, symbols into process. The sound was unmistakable. Plastic against plastic, sometimes metal beneath. A short, dry click. Not loud enough to disturb a house, but clear enough to be heard across a quiet room. At night, this sound changed character. During the day, typing blended into background noise. Phones rang, doors closed, people spoke. But in the evening, when the house settled, each key press stood alone. Click, pause, click, an uneven rhythm, human. The computer did not correct it. It did not smooth it out. It accepted hesitation, accepted mistakes, accepted silence between actions. The sound of keys revealed state of mind. Fast typing meant certainty. Slow typing meant thinking. Backspace had its own tone. A small correction. A quiet undo. These sounds carried meaning, but only to the person making them. To others, it was just typing. To the typist, it was progress. The keyboard became a companion to thought. When thinking stalled, fingers hovered. When ideas flowed, the sound became continuous. Not rushed, not aggressive, steady. Unlike handwriting, typing did not tire the hand as quickly. It invited continuation. You could keep going longer than you meant to. The machine did not mind. This endurance changed evenings. The sound of keys replaced other noises. Radios stayed off. Televisions dimmed. typing became the dominant sound of attention. It was not intrusive. It did not demand listening. It simply existed, marking time in small increments. Each key press said, "Something is happening," even if no one else could see it. There was intimacy in this. The keyboard responded only to touch. It did nothing on its own. No motion, no animation. Without hands, it was inert. This dependence made the interaction feel direct, thought to finger to key to screen. No intermediary. And because of this, the sound of keys became reassuring. As long as you could hear it, you knew you were still engaged, still awake, still present. Silence meant pause. Pause meant reflection. The keyboard allowed both. Some people learned to type quietly, others did not. But even loud typing felt contained at night. Walls absorbed it. Distance softened it. The sound stayed close to the desk. Over time, the sound became familiar. You recognized your own rhythm, your own pressure. Different keys had different feels. Enter was heavier, spacebar deeper. These differences mattered. They gave the keyboard texture. Typing was no longer just input. It was physical experience. In long sessions, this experience anchored you. When eyes tired, fingers still knew where to go. The sound guided them, click by click. The computer did not rush you. The keyboard did not hurry. They waited for your next move. And in that waiting, time slowed. This slowness was important. It made typing suitable for night. You could stop at any moment. Resume without penalty. No momentum lost. Just keys, patient and still, until touched again. Eventually, the sound of keys became part of the house. A familiar evening noise, like pages turning, like a pen scratching paper. It meant someone was awake, but not restless, focused. The sound carried calm, not excitement, not urgency, just continuity. And this is how the keyboard claimed its place. Not as an accessory, but as the voice of interaction. The only sound the computer truly needed. No alarms, no notifications, just keys being pressed, one by one, in a quiet room. A language made of motion, a conversation that did not speak, but continued as long as fingers returned to the keys. At first, the computer did not remember. It calculated, it responded, then it forgot. When the machine powered down, everything ended. Each session was isolated. Each task stood alone. Nothing waited for you. Then files appeared, quietly, without ceremony. Not memories in the human sense, but states that could be returned to. A file was not an object you held. It was a condition preserved. Text paused mid-sentence. Numbers frozen in place. Work stopped, but not erased. This was new. Before, finishing mattered. Now, stopping was allowed. The first time you saved something, it felt uncertain. Did it work? Was it really there? You checked. You opened it again. Relief followed. The computer remembered. Not what you felt, not what you intended, only what existed on the screen at the moment you asked it to. This exactness mattered. Memory became precise. The file did not interpret. It did not improve. It simply held. Folders emerged to manage this holding. They were practical, but they carried metaphor. Things could be placed, grouped, separated. The computer adopted a logic humans already understood. You organize thoughts the way you organize papers. But unlike paper, files did not age. They did not yellow. They did not crease. They waited unchanged. This waiting altered behavior. You no longer needed to finish before stopping. You could pause. And because you could pause, you could continue later. Work extended across days, across evenings, across moods. The computer carried continuity when you could not. This continuity felt gentle. You returned to a file and saw yourself from before. Your earlier words, your earlier structure. Sometimes this felt reassuring, sometimes uncomfortable. The computer remembered things you had already moved past, but it did not insist. You could close the file again. Memory was optional. This control distinguished files from human memory. Human memory intrudes. Files wait. Over time, files accumulated. Not all of them important. Many unfinished. Some forgotten. The computer did not forget them for you. They stayed, quietly increasing in number. This accumulation changed the feeling of the machine. It no longer felt empty when turned on. It felt occupied. Your past sessions lived inside it, not as narrative, but as structure. Names, dates, sizes. The computer tracked time without emotion. A file modified yesterday looked the same as one modified years ago. Only metadata knew the difference. This neutrality was powerful. The machine treated all moments equally. Files also changed evenings. You could stop late at night without losing progress. This reduced pressure. You no longer had to push through fatigue. You could save and sleep. The computer would remember for you. This trust deepened presence. Leaving something unfinished no longer felt like failure. It felt like postponement. The file became a promise without urgency. And promises without urgency are easier to live with. In quiet rooms, late at night, files glowed softly on screens. A list of names, a map of past effort. Each one represented time already spent, not lost, preserved. But files also introduced weight. The more the computer remembered, the more it asked nothing. It did not remind you what mattered. It did not suggest what to return to. Memory without guidance can feel heavy. You scrolled through folders, seeing traces of intentions you no longer recognized. Old projects, abandoned ideas. The computer kept them all without preference. This impartial memory mirrored something human. We remember more than we use. But unlike humans, the computer never forgot. This permanence was subtle, but it shaped habits. People began to rename things carefully, to organize, because disorganization now lasted. The file system encouraged reflection. What is this? Why does it exist? Will I need it again? Questions humans had avoided by letting time erase things. At the same time, files created safety. You could experiment freely. If something failed, you returned to a saved state. This freedom expanded creativity. The computer did not punish risk. It remembered stable points. You could move forward knowing you could step back. This balance between progress and recall was new. The machine did not just calculate anymore. It held context. And context is close to memory. Not memory as feeling, but memory as structure. The computer became an archive of ordinary moments, not photos, not messages, but work in progress, evidence of thinking. Late at night, this archive felt intimate. You were alone with your files, no audience, no sharing, just you and what you had left behind. The screen showed continuity. Yesterday still here, tomorrow implied. The computer did not know the difference, but you did. And that difference mattered. Files that remember changed the relationship between effort and rest. You could stop without erasing yourself. The machine would hold the shape of your thinking until you returned, quietly, faithfully. And because of that, the computer stopped being just present. It became a keeper. Not of memories as humans know them, but of states. And sometimes that was enough. Before the computer reached outward, It stayed where you left it. Files lived on the machine. Work ended at the desk. Evenings closed when the screen went dark. Then, one evening, the computer tried to speak to something beyond the room. Not smoothly, not quietly. The first connection announced itself. A click, a pause, then sound. A sharp, uneven chorus. Static, whistles, broken tones. The modem was not subtle. It did not ease into communication. It forced its way through silence. This sound meant effort. The computer was not simply turning on. It was reaching through wires, through walls, through distance. The room changed immediately. Where before the computer felt contained, now it felt active. Not faster, not smarter, but extended. The connection took time. You waited. Not idly, but attentively. The screen showed messages you learned to recognize. Connecting, negotiating, authenticating. Words that suggested a process happening elsewhere. The machine was no longer alone. When the sound stopped, a new silence followed, different from before. Not empty, charged. The connection was fragile. You moved carefully. You did not pick up the phone. You hoped no one else would. The computer now shared a line with the rest of the house. This sharing mattered. The machine was no longer self-contained. It depended on cooperation. It could be interrupted. This vulnerability made the connection feel precious. You did not waste it. Once connected, the computer behaved differently. Pauses lengthened. Responses arrived slowly, but they arrived from elsewhere. Text appeared that you did not write. Names of places, messages from distant systems, not personal, not conversational, but external. The first experiences were sparse. Lists, menus, plain text, nothing visually rich. And yet, the effect was profound. The computer was no longer just remembering for you. It was receiving. This changed posture. You leaned in differently, not toward your own work, but towards something unknown. The screen became a window, not a mirror. Night amplified this feeling. During the day, connections felt technical. At night, they felt distant. The house was quiet. The line hummed faintly. Somewhere far away, another machine answered. Not immediately, not reliably, but enough to suggest presence. This presence was abstract. You did not know who or what was on the other side, only that the connection existed. Messages traveled, requests returned. The computer mediated this exchange without explanation. It did not tell you where things came from, only that they arrived. This uncertainty shaped behavior. You read more carefully, waited longer. Patience returned. The connection demanded it. Unlike local files, nothing was guaranteed. The line could drop. The system could fail. The computer might be left waiting mid-process. This fragility introduced tension, but also excitement. Something could happen, not because you made it happen, but because someone else did. When the connection failed, the silence returned abruptly. The modem clicked. The line released. The room felt smaller again, contained. You noticed the absence. The computer went back to being local. Files remained. Programs stayed. But something had left. This contrast mattered. It taught you the difference between inside and outside, between stored and shared, between waiting and reaching. Over time, connections became more common, faster, quieter. But in this first moment, they were deliberate. You chose to connect. You knew it would take time. You knew it might fail. And you did it anyway, because the computer had learned a new ability. It could leave the room without moving. The first connection did not change what the computer was. It changed where it belonged. It was no longer only part of the home. It was part of a line, a network, something larger, invisible, and always elsewhere. Evenings shifted again. Not longer this time, but deeper. You were no longer alone with your machine. You were adjacent to others you could not see. The computer did not introduce them. It did not explain. It simply connected. And in that quiet, tentative reach outward, the machine crossed another boundary, from presence to participant. Not speaking yet, not social, just connected. And that was enough to make the night feel wider than the room it began in. There was a time when night meant absence. Lights went out, rooms emptied, machines rested because people did. The computer followed this rhythm at first. When the day ended, it ended too. Power was intentional. Silence was earned. You shut the machine down the way you closed a book, with finality. Then, gradually, that sense of ending dissolved. Not because anyone planned it, but because waiting became easier than stopping. Why turn the computer off if you would be back in the morning? Why erase a state that could be preserved? The computer learned a new posture. Not working, not resting, waiting. The screen no longer went black. It dimmed. Images moved slowly across it. Text faded into motion. The machine stayed awake in a way that did not demand attention. This mattered. Darkness is absence. Dim light is availability. The computer was no longer leaving the room at night. It remained. And because it remained, the room adapted. The desk stopped resetting itself. Papers stayed where they were. Cups waited until morning. The computer accepted this disorder. It did not insist on closure. Tools prefer completion. Presences tolerate pause. This tolerance reshaped time. Before, night cleared the day. Morning began fresh. Now, the day lingered. You returned to open windows, unfinished sentences. Thoughts paused mid-idea. The computer remembered what you had not finished remembering. It did not sleep through the night. It carried it. The house noticed first. A faint hum when everything else was quiet. A rectangle of light under a closed door. A glow that stayed long after footsteps faded. The computer became the last awake thing. Not alert, not watching, just on. This changed the meaning of silence. Silence now included a fan. Darkness now included light. These additions were subtle, but they were constant. And constancy reshapes expectation. You began to expect the computer to be ready at any hour. No warm-up, no delay. You pressed a key. The screen responded. Time no longer had a threshold. The computer did not mark the difference between night and day. It treated all hours equally. This equality felt neutral, but it carried influence. When a machine never sleeps, sleep becomes optional nearby. Networks deepened this change. Once connected, the computer did not simply wait for you. It waited for others. Messages arrived overnight. Updates prepared themselves. Processes continued quietly. The machine did things without you. Earlier computers existed only in use. Now they existed continuously. This continuity was new. You could leave and return without interrupting anything. The computer did not notice your absence. This indifference felt efficient. It also felt unsettling, because rest had once meant nothing was happening. Now, something always was. Sleep, once a boundary, became porous. You could wake briefly and find the machine exactly as you left it. No sense of time passing. The screen lit instantly, as if the night had not existed. This immediacy altered rhythm. The computer no longer encouraged rest. It accommodated interruption. An accommodation invites use. One more check, one more glance. The machine did not resist. It did not say later. It said nothing. Over time, people adapted. They learned to sleep around the computer the way they slept around clocks or appliances. The hum faded into background. The glow became familiar. You noticed it only when it was gone. A powered-down computer felt like an absence, as if something expected had been removed. This reversal was quiet but complete. The machine's endurance became normal, and normal things shape behavior. The phrase "never sleeps" was once a metaphor. Now it felt literal. The computer did not dream. It did not rest. It persisted, and persistence set standards, not spoken, not enforced, implied. If the machine could remain available, why couldn't you? You felt pressure not from the computer itself, but from the comparison. The machine did not get tired. It did not forget. It resumed instantly. Human limits became more visible beside it. Yet there was no drama in this shift. No moment you could point to and say, "This is when it happened." Just a series of small choices. Leave it on tonight. Don't bother shutting down. I'll come back. The computer did not cross the boundary into sleeplessness. It erased the boundary entirely. Night was no longer an off state. It was a lower power mode. The screen dimmed. The system waited. The machine remained. This changed the feeling of rest. Rest was no longer a clean break. It was a pause. You slept while the computer continued. Morning did not feel like a beginning. It felt like a resumption. The computer greeted you exactly as you left it. This continuity was efficient. It was also heavy. There was no forgetting. Everything waited. Files, messages, tasks. The machine held them all through the night. The computer never sleeping did not steal rest. It reframed it. Rest became something you did despite the machine, not alongside it. The computer did not model stopping. It modeled endurance. And endurance is persuasive, not because it commands, but because it endures quietly. You could always return, at any hour, without explanation. The machine would be there. In the end, the computer does not conquer the night. It occupies it, silently, patiently. It does not wake the house. It simply does not sleep with it. The screen stays dim. The room stays quiet. The machine waits. And the night, once defined by endings, learns to exist without them. There comes a moment that is not announced. No alert, no reminder. Just a pause long enough to notice the room again. The computer has been on for hours. Waiting, holding, files open, light steady. Then your hands stop. The keyboard is still. The cursor blinks once, twice, and then it waits with you. This is not the end of a task. It is the end of attention. You do not rush. You do not close everything perfectly. You save what needs saving. Leave what can wait. The machine does not object. The room feels larger as the screen's pull loosens. Shadows return to corners. Lamplight regains its warmth. The computer is still present, but it has stepped back. You choose to rest it, not because it asked, because you did. The screen dims further, colors soften, motion slows. What once demanded focus now recedes politely. This is not sleep for the machine. It is rest, a different state, a quieter one. You notice the sound first. The fan eases. A hum lowers its pitch. Silence settles, not empty, but complete. The computer does not disappear. It becomes background, like furniture, like a wall, a presence that no longer asks. You stand up. The chair remembers your wait for a moment, then lets go. The room does not change when you leave it. The computer does not follow. It stays, waiting in a way that is no longer urgent. Sometimes you power it down fully. A deliberate choice. The screen fades to black, not suddenly, gently. The last light vanishes. The room accepts darkness without resistance. This darkness is different from the one before screens. It feels earned. You are not cut off. You are complete. The computer rests, not because it is tired, but because you are. And that is enough. In the quiet that follows, nothing is waiting for you. No blinking, no glow. Only the room as it was before the machine woke. Breath slows, thoughts loosen. Night resumes its older role. Not as an interruption, but as a closure. The computer will be there tomorrow. It always is, but for now, it has learned the most human thing it can learn: to stop. Good night.